Do you remember Magnetica? Probably not, but that's okay. In fact, allow me to remind you of something you likely might remember. Nintendo DS download stations. See, back in the mid-2000s when the Nintendo DS was still shiny and new, Nintendo would send special Nintendo DS cartridges to big box retail stores to plug into a Nintendo DS that would broadcast special demos of the latest and greatest Nintendo DS games. Gone were the days of breaking your neck in front of a Walmart kiosk. Now, all you had to do was whip out your DS, go to the download play section, and you could connect to a network and download a game demo to your DS that would stay there until you powered off the system. Back when I was younger and while Mom used to bring me to work with her sometimes during the summers, she would occasionally take me by the local bagel shop on her way into work, which was conveniently located close enough to a nearby big box retailer that had a download station. 10 minutes later, I had a chalky chip bagel in one hand, a Snapple in the other, and a brand new game demo downloaded to my DS. These days absolutely slapped, and were my first exposure to a lot of Nintendo's first-party offerings, specifically titles from the Touch Generations label, like True Swing Golf, Big Brain Academy, and Magnetica. In fact, the only reason I remember Magnetica is because of the DS download stations, and it piqued my curiosity enough to reach back into the fuzzy recesses of my memory and revisit this forgotten Nintendo puzzler. It all started in 1998. Well, not with Magnetica, but with a different game, Puzz Loop. And if you aren't familiar with Puzz Loop, no worries. The Magnetica box art can't even get 5 words in without reminding you that Puzz Loop exists. Puzz Loop was an arcade puzzle game created by Mitchell Corporation, a Japanese developer that began creating games in the late 80s, specializing primarily in puzzle games. While not their first game, Puzz Loop proved to be fairly successful in the Japanese arcade scene after an international release, enough so that the game would be re-released for home consoles, now being renamed to Ballistic in the West. I'm not exactly sure what the impetus for the rename was, but this wouldn't be the last time Puzz Loop wouldn't be called Puzz Loop. The Puzz Loop gameplay proved popular enough that it would continue to see various ports and re-releases on several platforms from the end of the 90s until the early 2010s. This popularity was likely due to the growing interest in the casual gaming market in the early 2000s, thanks to the rising usage of cell phones and mobile gaming, and in fact, spawned many imitators of Puzz Loop. In an interview with Insert Credit in January of 2006, Roy Ozaki, the president of Mitchell Corporation around the time of Magnetica's release, expressed his frustration over PopCap ripping off Puzz Loop with their own release of Zuma, and Mitchell Corporation's inability to take PopCap to court, believing that the US judicial system would be biased against his company for not being based in the United States, and straight up calling PopCap bad businessmen. And when you compare the two side by side, I'll let you be the judge, but if I didn't tell you which one was Puzz Loop or Zuma, would you really be able to tell the difference? 2 months following the Insert Credit interview, Magnetica was released on March 2nd, 2006 as Shunken Puzz Loop in Japan, later being released on June 5th as Magnetica in North America, and finally releasing as Action Loop on January 6, 2007 in PAL regions. In case you're keeping count, that now brings the total number of name variations for Puzz Loop to 4. Magnetica was not the first time Mitchell Corporation had brought Puzz Loop to Nintendo hardware, with Ballistic having released on the Game Boy Color in 1999. But this is the first time a Puzz Loop game would be published by Nintendo, and it was the first game to be officially released with the Touch Generations label branding in the United States, indicating that it catered to casual audiences. In fact, both it and Big Brain Academy launched on the same day as part of the flagship titles for Touch Generations, with previously released casual titles fathered into the brand. Magnetica's gameplay, and by extension Puzz Loop, but I'll be referring to it as Magnetica from here on out for clarity, in its simplest form is a match 3 puzzle game, but with a unique twist. Instead of a wall of differently colored shapes and tiles that need to be arranged to make matches, such as Bejeweled, Candy Crush, or even Panel de Pon, Magnetica features a long string of colored marbles that are always constantly moving towards the reactor at the end of the path. If the marbles reach the reactor, then it's an instant game over. To keep the trail from getting to the end, the player has to send differently colored marbles flying from the central launcher into the path to make matches of 3 or more. If you break the chain, the trail temporarily stops moving until the marbles in the back catch up. But if you break the train and the colors that remain match each other, the front of the train is pulled backwards until the matching marbles meet. Almost almost like a magnet. You'll want to set up big chains of these magnetic combos as they give you a big boost in score and help pull the marble train way far back. The goal is to survive for as long as possible, as the game will throw more color types at you and various nuisances like rockets that push the trail towards defeat much more rapidly. Magnetica's basic gameplay is very simple, satisfying, and refreshing in a way that makes it stand out from other puzzle games. In standard puzzle games, we'll say Tetris for example, typically the difficulty is raised by increasing the speed to an unmanageable rate. What I initially appreciated about Magnetica is how it does the exact opposite, slowing down the action to a dreadful crawl, blaring sirens warning of your impending failure as the marbles get really close to causing a game over, inciting internal panic as you try to figure out how to save your skin. It's something akin to trying to save a sinking ship. I say initially because, well, we'll get to that in a moment. So, what sets Magnetica apart from its Puzz Loop predecessors? With the exception of obvious touchscreen implementation and a mid-2000s aesthetic that practically screams battle manga or Saturday morning action cartoon, Magnetica doesn't differ too far from past iterations, at least when it comes to its main core gameplay. What makes Magnetica different is the large variety of playstyles the game offers. Magnetica has 3 different single-player modes and a multiplayer mode. The first single-player mode, Challenge Mode, is most similar to the classic arcade gameplay of Puzz Loop. In fact, it's nearly identical. Marbles head towards the reactor, and you fling marbles at the chain to break it up and keep it from getting to the center. Now, playing the arcade game like this is obviously a little bit different due to the touchscreen implementation. In classic Puzz Loop, the launcher is controlled via a directional input and then launched with a button press, guaranteeing that whatever direction the launcher is facing, the marble will launch at that exact direction and with the same velocity whenever the launch button is pressed. Magnetica adds an interesting new mechanic to that formula: human error. Not only is a steady hand a requirement to make sure your aim is true, but the velocity at which the ball will fly from the launcher is dependent upon the speed that you flick on the touchscreen, which really makes consistency and precision vital to not completely screwing everything up. There are 4 different difficulties and map layouts for challenge mode, and the game ends once you either clear 99 levels of gameplay or get a game over, and then your high score is logged. This mode ended up being my favorite. The gameplay is straightforward, and the action of clearing away big chains of marbles is immensely satisfying. And then we move on to quest mode, which is something similar to a mission mode. Across 50 or so odd levels, quest mode takes the core mechanics of Magnetica and throws in all kinds of extra obstacles to spice up the main gameplay. It starts off easy enough, using things like multiple paths or switches that will change the flow of the marbles. Once you get to the later levels, the layouts begin to repeat themselves, but this time have new obstacles added. There are black holes that suck your marbles into themselves, energy spheres that arc your shots, barriers, spaceships that blow these virus clouds all over the touchscreen that will have you huffing and puffing into the DS's microphone like a goddamn Hammond master trying to clear your vision. And this for me is where the cracks in quest mode started showing. Look, I'm not gonna pretend like I'm a master at Magnetica. In fact, I probably range from terrible to painfully average. Just playing standard Magnetica is already enough to keep my mind busy, and when one of the obstacles is added into the mix, it can add an interesting new angle to the gameplay. But it's the later levels that begin to stack multiple effects on top of each other that really had me beginning to pull my hair out in frustration. Quest 39 is a prime example of this. Let me break it down for you. You've already got 4 separate paths of marbles to keep track of, which is a lot in and of itself. But you also have a black hole in one corner and a gravitational orb in the other corner, both of which unpredictably arc your shots and make aiming in dire situations almost next to impossible. This adds an element of luck, which ultimately ruins Magnetica's skill-based gameplay. All of a sudden, that slow, dreadful crawl and blaring alarm is a lot less of an interesting gameplay quirk and more of an extreme nuisance when you're trying to juggle, multitask, and overcompensate for too many things. Even the addition of power-ups that will clear all of a certain color of marble, or freeze, slow down, or reverse the paths of the marble chains do very little to alleviate the sense of frustration that comes from these kinds of levels. But these are few and far between and are relegated mostly to the second half of quest mode. If you're able to actually master all of the gimmicky new mechanics thrown at you, there's even a medal system that gives you silver or gold clear rankings depending on how many marble chains you can create. Overall, quest mode does have some interesting ideas that do a lot to shake up the main gameplay. There are just occasions where things get a little too spicy for the game's own good. The final single-player mode is Puzzle Mode, and it really puts your knowledge of Magnetica's mechanics to the test more so than any other mode, especially the magnetic attraction. As you may have already guessed, the Puzzle Mode presents you with a string of marbles and then gives you a specific set of marbles to launch at the string that must all be used, and must perfectly clear out every marble by the final throw. This is definitely the least stressful and most relaxing of Magnetica's single-player offerings, but make no mistake, the game's 60 puzzles are fiendishly difficult at times in the best possible way. This is the best mode to appreciate the incredibly chill soundtrack by Toshiyuki Sudo, the game's sound designer and composer. The music is a great hybrid of bubbly techno pop mixed with a cold mechanical edge, and really suits the mood and aesthetics of the game. Because the music is usually interrupted by the alarm and panic theme when you're in danger in the other modes, it's nice to be able to take a moment in puzzle mode and enjoy the chill vibes. Throw in the Nintendo DS Rumble Pack, as it is compatible and even shipped with the European copy of the game, to experience true sensory relaxation as you feel feedback from the marbles rolling on the track. If you've exhausted the single-player modes, Magnetica also lets you play in multiplayer through local wireless via multi-card play and single-card DS download play, a feature that I will applaud every time it exists because it was a great idea and I wish it still survived on modern handhelds as well. I'm looking at you, Nintendo Switch. You can access the same content between single and multi-card play. The only difference is if both players have a copy of Magnetica, the game will record the data and stats from your multiplayer matches. So, unless that's something really important to you, nothing of value is really lost. You and a friend can play head-to-head in the arcade mode, and when one of you clears out a big chunk of marbles, the junk is sent as clear bearings to the other player's game. Additionally, the game allows you to utilize power-ups that are basically weaponized versions of all the same obstacles you had to avoid in quest mode. There's a nice variety of options to tweak for puzzle fans to really get their mileage out of the multiplayer. Though the omission of Wi-Fi multiplayer is a bit strange considering Magnetica came out after Mario Kart DS ignited Nintendo's online multiplayer mania, but considering the official servers have long shut down, it's a bit of a moot point. Magnetica would not be the last time Nintendo and Mitchell Corporation worked together on a project. In fact, they teamed up again to release Magnetica Twist on WiiWare in 2008, which greatly simplified the game so as to better suit the newly implemented motion controls, which, for a game like Magnetica that requires this much precision, honestly sounds like a nightmare. Mitchell Corporation was also one of the companies that would collaborate on the title Wii Play, Motion, along with developers from Chunsoft, Goodfeel, and other members of Nintendo's internal development teams. They'd also go on to release Tokyo Crash Mobs on the 3DS, another iteration of Puzz Loop, which involved throwing real people instead of marbles, because, of course, why not? And was the last game released from Mitchell Corporation, as all company activity has been suspended since November of 2012, 3 months after the Japanese release of Tokyo Crash Mobs. It's unclear what the exact cause for the suspension was, but with nearly a decade of radio silence since then, it raises the question if Mitchell Corporation will ever truly come back. Puzz Loop is the legacy that Mitchell Corporation will most likely be remembered for, and despite okay to middling reviews of Magnetica when it released, I found it to be quite exceptional. As someone who had never played a Puzz Loop game prior to my experience with Magnetica, the gameplay feels fresh and fun, and has certainly held up well over time. Is it worth finding a copy if you've already played another Puzz Loop game or poured hours of time into something like, say, Zuma or Luxor? It's tough to say, and it'll likely come down to your personal preference on puzzle games. But if you're looking for a fun puzzle game with addicting gameplay, cool music, a slick graphical presentation, and a whopping amount of content that will challenge even the most hardcore of puzzle masochists, give Magnetica a go. Thank you so much for taking the time to check out my video. Did you ever play Magnetica? Let me know about your thoughts and memories down in the comments below. Until next time, friends, stay safe, and I'll see you later.